dead center. Which was welcoming you was also a Samanvay. It was this very famous collaboration of Yehud Menuhin, Ravi Shankar, and AlokRai. And that I welcome all of you once again. Those of you who do not know me, I am Rizio. I take care of the creative aspects of this festival, ILF Samanvay. As many of you know, most of you must be familiar with this festival. So I'm here to kind of brief you a little bit on the directional aspirations of this festival, because we are actually at a turning point. We are trying to reach out this festival to different audiences, and so we are at a kind of crossroads. So I think I'll take a little while to explain how we are going, so that it becomes a real people's movement, and all of you feel part of this, what we are trying to do here. So, for the last 5 years, ILF Samanvay has created a small but dedicated public platform for Indian languages to come together and interact. This Indian Languages Festival is indeed a Samanvay. So it upholds democracy, creates intercultural knowledge networks, resists hierarchies, and celebrates friendships of different kinds. As Gandhi said, no culture can live if it attempts to be exclusive. This is especially true of a pluralistic country like India, and the name and philosophy of ILF Samanvay reflect the vigil our multilingual, multi-dynamic context demands of us. So, ILF Samanvay privileges the vital principles of coordination that lets us live, work, and remember together in this many-splendored country. We stand for coexistence, cooperation, and commemoration. And our organization thus partakes in and invites all of you to participate in a cultural continuum that transcends the logistics of a mere event in time. This is something which we really want to do. We don't want to look at this festival any longer as one event which is happening once a year, but it's a continuing discourse, a continuum. We are aware that our responsibility as the organizers of this space is to remind our societies to expand the horizons of our language and expression, to be mindful that the limits of my language mean the limits of my world. You know this quote. So, the overall design of this space, including that of its intellectual, physical, and virtual sides, engages with this country's pluralistic cultural destiny, vis-a-vis its own contemporary governance aspirations on the one hand, and the future of humanity at large on the other. We truly believe that Indian cultures have a lot to contribute to the world today. Hence, at ILF, we keep ourselves in the charged middle ground of conversation, moving, changing, and describing our times in a non-violent manner. So, our mascot, Heel, we call this mascot Heel, who is an androgynous, ageless, itinerant, non-violent yet revolutionary storyteller. Here is the reflection of our vision and design. And our objectives are also in tune with these ideals. We wish to facilitate an atmosphere and create a ground for creative collaboration, cultural companionship, and critical thinking within and among Indian languages and cultures. To understand language beyond the verbal and the literary, and explore expressions through visual arts, performance arts, food cultures, sports, science, technology, and other epistemic fields. This is our aspiration, that we should not look at this space as a lit fest, one of those events, but it is a space where we are thinking about language deeply, profoundly. And so for the same reason, we want to extend this discourse beyond the verbal and the literary and extend it to the intersections of various other forms of expression. And we also wish to promote translations. We have already started some projects on this, and from and into Indian languages, especially direct translation between two languages, rather than going through a mediating language, to contribute to the growth and development of individual Indian languages, especially the dying languages, as a space that is dealing with languages. We do not want to distinguish between major and minor languages. All languages are important for us. And we already have some awards to recognize talents and achievements in fields falling under the mandate of ILF Samanvay. We would like to expand on this area also, to bring international critical, creative, and media attention on contemporary Indian cultural sites and development. This is something which we hope in the coming days we will invest a lot of time and energy in. And to create, this is very important. I'm extremely happy to see this audience here and the engagement that all of you have, to create a sustained audience. So I would actually request all of you not to just look at this as one odd event you're coming to because you're interested in this particular topic, but we're beginning a conversation today. We're beginning a discourse today. So we would want all of you to participate in this as a movement which is just beginning. And to create critical appreciation and reception for innovation in contemporary Indian literature, arts, and other fields of thought and expression. It's all easier said than done, and our very small team works very hard towards this. I would like to mention the names of my absolutely adorable colleagues here. Apurvanand, who is the program curator, who could not be here due to an emergency, but he misses us and we miss him today. Diksha Nath, who is here, is our art curator. Priya Ravish Mehra, our set designer. All of us are here except Apurva. Adil Jamal, our brand designer. Ashlyn Matthew, the festival coordinator. Aks Malhotra, the Whiskit, who does our website. I always say he's just 22 or 23 and he does our website. Shubhra Bandhavadhyaya, the editor of our blog, Why the ILF Samanvay blog. If you wish to contribute, this is an open space for people to come and reflect on languages in India. So if anybody wishes to contribute to this, please catch hold of him, he's here. And A.J. Thomas, our poetry editor. Monica Dawa, photographer, she's here. And the marvelous IHC team. Shadab Hussain, who is behind, he's here. All this is because of him. The production in charge, Renu Oberoi, the head of programs, Enoch Denraj and Pankaj Srivastava, who is from the Habitat Learning Center, who give us all tech support, and Sachin Wasip and Naresh of the programs department. I would like to stress that the work of this incredible young team can reach the desired results only if we can make ILF a people's movement, and a people's movement for languages in India. And that's why we have created a festival frame with these verticals in which different people can participate. So we have reading and discussion panels through these different programs that we do, workshops and mentoring programs, books and events, performances, curated art programs and exhibitions, talent search, awards and recognitions, food, this is something which we introduced last year, social transformation and outreach programs. So the programming under these verticals revolves around a theme every year. The festival is taking a new turn, as I told you, this year with our initiating a series of pre-festival programs to reveal the multiple strands of our complex themes. Language is not a simple thing any longer, so we really would like to explore the theme in a more nuanced and extended fashion, and not just do a few programs or a few panels during the main festival. So termed No Tongues Barred Conversations. This is the first event in that series of things that we will do now. We will have programs at the IHC and elsewhere through the next few months, leading up to the main festival in November. The brand name shows our commitment to freedom of expression, and we are also delighted that we are initiating this in the wake of the inspiring ruling by the Madras High Court in favor of Perumal Murugan, who was the winner of the ILF Samanvay Bhasha Saman 2015 last year. Yes. This year too, we continue our quest towards contributing to a democracy of languages in the country. With that, I invite Mr. Rakesh Kakar, the IC Director and the Festival Director of ILF, the facilitator of all this action, to announce this year's theme. And the announcement will be followed by a panel discussion on languages of Delhi. This is the first No Tongues Barred conversation, and Vidyan Singh, the Director of Programs at IHC and Pillar of Strength for ILF team, will introduce the panel and the speakers. Thank you all again for being here, and I request your continued support so that ILF sings its potential as an ode to joy. Thank you.
Thank you, Rizio. After that introduction, I have very little to say, and I'm sure you must be eagerly waiting for the distinguished panel that awaits you. I would like to thank all of you for coming today, and in particular our very distinguished speakers. The theme of the festival this year, it is already up on the website, so I'm just re-announcing it, not announcing it. It is language as public action. The dates are 5th to 7th November. So we start on a Friday and end on a Sunday. And we do hope that not only for the main festival, but also for the run-up to the festival, we will be having events like this every month from now up till November. So I do hope that we'll see all of you in all these events, and please to tell everybody else who's interested in this theme and this particular subject to come in larger numbers. And with those words, I hand over to Vidyun to introduce the speakers.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before I introduce our very eminent panel for this evening's session of ILF Samanvay, on behalf of India Habitat Center, I would like to take a minute that Mr. Kakar saved, use that minute, to say a big thank you to all of you who have made our annual Indian Languages Festival what it is today. The wonderful minds, the creative directors, past and present, advisors, authors, artists, and supporters who have over the last 6 years believed in our vision and worked to give it shape and direction. Today, ILF Samanvay has developed a distinctive and different voice, and in its 6th year this year, it further raises the bar to interpret Indian languages beyond verbal terms and explore the transverbal possibilities of human expression and communication, a direction that is the vision of our festival's creative director, Rizio. So thank you all, and now for the panel, should we seat them so that I can just check? Can I ask Alok? Should we seat them right there on the first thing there? So, may I request AlokRai, a writer, translator, who has been a teacher at the English department of Delhi University for years. His areas of interest include modern English literature and cultural processes in modern North India, with particular preference for issues of language and literature. His publications include Orwell and the Politics of Despair, Hindi Nationalism, and the translation in English of Premchand's Nirmala. He loves to say that he has retired both from university and from Delhi in horror, if only we would let him. Please welcome AlokRai. May I now call SohailHashmi, a Delhiwala who loves to talk about his city. He conducts heritage walks in Delhi, writes about Delhi, its language, its food, its water bodies, and its monuments. He also makes documentaries, writes and blogs on issues of culture, language, education, and communalism. He was director of Leap Years, a creative activity center for children, and is the founding trustee of SyedaHameed. Sohail, since you are going to be moderating the evening, can I request you to sit in the center? It might be easier for you to be able to. SyedaHameed can sit. Okay, I thought you were going to say that. However, okay, SyedaHameed. Dr. SyedaHameed, a writer and feminist, is widely recognized for her passionate engagement in public affairs and social issues, especially for women, minorities, and peace. She is a former member of the Planning Commission of India and the National Commission for Women, while also being the founding member of the Muslim Women's Forum. Last but not least, Fouzia. Fouzia is the first woman Dastango of modern times and has been working towards integrating storytelling with education. She belongs to Old Delhi and brings this flavor to her storytelling while also narrating women-centric tales. So there we have our panel, and may I request and hand over the evening now to Sohail to take this forward. Thank you.
Well, to get the conversation going, I thought we'll begin with Alok and I'll request him to place the overall frame within which we are going to be talking about the languages of Delhi. So, would you rather, yeah, or you can do it. Yeah.
Gosh, I have a computer sitting here which might react to my presence, I'm afraid. So long as it doesn't. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted at the coincidence between the theme of this evening and what I had intended to say anyway. Because in fact, this is exactly the kind of thing that I love to talk about. So, thank you very much. It was clever of you to have anticipated me. Okay. I have all my life, and I have some students here so they can actually confirm this, I've always insisted as a kind of central fact of engaging with literature to recognize that language is a living thing. It's something that we choose to. It's very difficult to take on board the fact that language is a living thing. It is a fact that is sought to be denied through grammars and dictionaries, which create the illusion that you can actually freeze language, that language is this. But these are, alas, only snapshots. And language keeps moving. And as a living thing, all right, this is a theme on which I would and do expand given the occasion. But as a living thing, it is central to my notion of language that language is wise. That, now I don't know what metaphor I need in order to take on that fact, but languages carry traces, codes, insights at a very deep civilizational level. And so I believe that we must be attentive to the wisdom of language, of what language can tell us. And in thinking about the theme of this evening and indeed the larger festival, I thought it was rather kind and generous of language to have provided me with an insight into two radically opposed notions of culture. Because to me, culture comes into, the one less obvious sense of culture is the one that you associate with the biology lab. It is bacterial cultures. And it is essential to the notion of bacterial cultures that they are created in purity. The whole point about the biology lab is that you don't allow contamination to enter so that you can get a pure culture. All right? The other sense of culture, which people like me and you work with, is the exact opposite. It is precisely what is hybrid, necessarily hybrid. It proceeds through heterogeneity, through the workings of diversity. Okay, so this notion of culture, which comes to me as part of the wisdom of the language itself. All right, all it needs is for us to recognize, to listen to what the language is telling one. Okay, this notion of heterogeneity and diversity is again intrinsic to my own sense of what language is. Because my own sense of language is that language, well, for one, a solitary person doesn't need language. Language is necessarily born out of a reaching out to otherness, to difference, which is why, of course, as the romantic cliche has it, the perfectly loverly oneness when souls are merged needs no language. It is precisely when we are unmerged, when we are different, when we have different ideas, different things, that we need language. All right? So, so the notion of heterogeneity, diversity, otherness, reaching out to difference, the notion of community is intrinsic to language. All right? And that when one does violence to a language, it is not merely blanking out some slogan on a wall or some other, something to do with words. It is violence at a much deeper level. All right? And the notion, the idea of languages in some sense carrying the code of community is, there's one very, I lived away from India for a long time, and anyone who has lived away from their own place for any time know how quickly the merest phrase or fragment of one's language creates a bond, creates a sense of community instantly. Language carries the code of who we are, and in a foreign land, again, language is what creates this bond. Now, with this kind of background, I want to bring it closer to home and to the theme of this evening, which is the languages of Delhi. And I want to lead into it with a reflection on the mystery of that mysterious construct, Hindustani. All right? Because, of course, as people who are familiar with the literature know, that there are skeptics who say that Hindustani does not exist. And perhaps if one actually wanted to find it in a grammar book, it probably does not exist, because it slopes off into, is it Hindi? Is it Urdu? And depending on how one is feeling, whether one is feeling suspicious or generous, it is one or the other. All right. But to my mind, I think if one wants to solve the mystery of Hindustani, then to look at dictionaries and grammars is to look in the wrong place. What Hindustani is, to my mind, is a communicative intention. It is the language that is born when one reaches out to someone who is not oneself, who is different. So that all of us who are bilingual, trilingual speakers know this, that we alter our speech in order to suit the audience, the interlocutor that one is dealing with. So to my mind, Hindustani is indicative of this communicative intention. And to introduce one last theme into this, I think it's somewhere there, but I'm not quite sure. It is that this experience of heterogeneity, this experience of inescapable heterogeneity, is necessarily an urban process. By definition, a city is where you encounter people who are not like yourself. All right? And therefore, it is in negotiating, in living with difference, that the thing that we call Hindustani is created. And by way of a kind of dictionary example of the kind of thing I'm talking about, I want to refer to a wonderful dictionary from 1879, I think, Fallon,
Yes, sir.
all right, who is glossing the meaning of butch. Now, given what has happened to our languages, I'm sure not all of you know what butch means even, frankly. Butch is a kind of country bumpkin, sort of uncivilized, right? And the example that Fallon gives is, "Kaisa butch hai, Hindustani nahi janta." All right? So that to know Hindustani is to be part of the urban experience of diversity and of dealing with heterogeneity. So now, to my mind, therefore, as living things, our languages carry in an encoded, inscribed form our cultural histories. That is, if we read our languages sensitively, as indeed I believe my fellow panelists are going to do later, all right, we can read our histories, our common lived experience in the way our languages have been produced, recorded, and so on. Okay? And I suppose that is where I would like to leave it. Having rather to have produced my frame, now I would hand it over to Sohail, who can now illustrate the way in which our languages, the language that he wants to talk about, carries the code of our past, but also necessarily implicit in the notion of history, the notion that languages encode not merely our past, they also encode our future. All right? That which can carry the imprint of the past must necessarily be sensitive to the imprint of the futures, the possible futures that we might make or might be making already. Thank you.
Taking off from where Alok has left, essentially, to my mind, what Alok has outlined for us is that languages have to be inclusive, that the process of evolution of languages is an inclusive process, that they are constantly changing, that they are dynamic, they are constantly evolving and imbibing. He has also said, and I think absolutely correctly, that these evolutions have to be urban development. They are essentially urban, because that is where people belonging to different traditions come together. I'll begin, because we are going to be talking of the languages of Delhi. So I'll begin with a reference to Amir Khusro, actually to his guru, to Nizamuddin. His father died when Nizamuddin was a very small child. He shifted to his maternal grandfather's house, who also died a few years later. So Nizamuddin's mother and her mother's brother shifted to Delhi. And they took a house on rent. in a place that all of you are familiar with. You would have heard the name Hausrani. Now just think of this. Can you take a house on rent in a village? Villages have no houses on rent. Hausrani was not a village. It was a qasbah. The capital was Qutub. And this was a suburb of Qutub, where you could take rooms on rent. And when they moved from there, they moved into Achini. That is where Nizamuddin's mother is buried. So next to Hausrani was Achini, where also you could get houses on rent. What we know as villages of Delhi today were suburbs of the capital of North India. We have turned them into villages. Prior to all that, the people who lived here were the Jats and the Gujars. These are the native people of this city. All of us are outsiders. And it is this mixing over more than 1,000 years that gave birth to the language that we know as Hindustani or Hindi or Urdu. Depending on where you are standing, you can decide what language this is. But this is how it was born. And it imbibed from a very vast territory. Turks, Pashtun speaking, Persian speaking, Iranians, Afghans, Uzbeks, Tajiks, and later the Portuguese and the French and the Dutch, all of them have contributed to this language. And as they were coming in, there were places where these interactions were taking place. Khusro told Nizamuddin to write in the language of the people so that the message of the Sufis can be communicated. And that is when Khusro begins to write in Hindi. In the marketplace, between haggling traders and people who had brought all kinds of things from Central Asia, between them, how do you measure how many knots per square inch? So gira, wazan, gaz, qameez, maize, kursi, all these words became a part of the language of the city. There were caravanserais, and people were traveling across, and they spoke different languages. And the innkeepers picked up words of different languages and mixed them with their mother tongues. And so you had Saraiki, the language in which the Sufis of Punjab wrote. And there were the discourses between the Nirgun poets and the Sufi poets, and their exchanges between them, where this language crossed all kinds of barriers. Look at the poetry of Kabir, of Nana, of Meera. These are all things. And in the army camp, the commander spoke Turkish, and the soldiers spoke Rohilkhandi, Baghelkhandi, Bhojpuri, and Haryanvi, and Marwadi, and Mewadi, and Hadoti, and all this mixed. And that is the language of Delhi. And then this language traveled. It went to Gujarat with the Turk Sardars. Then it went to the Bahmani kingdom. And when the Bahmani kingdom broke up, Bijapur and Golconda picked up this language, named it Dakkani, and made it their official language. While Delhi ceases to be capital, shifts to Agra, and the Mughal kings are promoting Braj. Up to Aurangzeb, all of them write poetry in Braj. Many of you will know, Aurangzeb wrote love poetry in Braj. Yes, love poetry in Braj. In praise of his favorite queen, who is buried in Aurangabad. So, it is not the Mughal court that was patronizing Urdu. it was the rebels from the Mughal court of Deccan who were patronizable. And then it arrived here in the 17th century with the poetry of Wali Dakkani. And then it began to flourish. And that language continues to get transformed in every way, even today. So what we are trying to do today is, we'll give you some examples. In poetry, which Saida Appa would read, and in prose, which Fouzia will read. Also, little references to festivals, to rituals, what kind of words, what kind of things were used in for example, Saida Appa was just telling us about the kind of things that were used in nature, which is yes, 16 सिंगार में क्या क्या चीजें इस्तेमाल होती थी. There is a list, and it's a rhyming list. So I think we'll begin with that.
क्यों नहीं 16 सिंगार very appropriate.
खवातीन क्यों बताएं 16 सिंगार? Men should talk about 16 सिंगार.
उनको आपने दे दिया तो बहुत गड़बड़ हो जाएगी.
चलिए, तो after this wonderful framework that has been presented by Alok and then Sohail, तो मैं 16 सिंगार की बात करती हूँ. तो ये 16 सिंगार क्या है? सुनिए. कंघी सफेदा बिंदी सुरमा, कंघी सफेदा बिंदी सुरमा, तेल अरगजा पान मिस्सी, तेल अरगजा पान मिस्सी, नील मेहंदी फूल दातुन, नील मेहंदी फूल दातुन, आलता चंदन मंझन उपटन. ये हुए 16 सिंगार. गिन लीजिए इसको. अब सुनिए कपड़े के जिस रंग का जोड़ा उसी रंग के जेवर. और अब कपड़े मौसम के लिहाज से, कपड़े मौसम या त्योहार के लिहाज से पहने जाते थे. बसंत में बसंती, ईद में उन्नाबी, मुहर्रम में काला, सावन में हरा और होली में जर. और नौरोज के दिन नजूमी जो रंग का कपड़ा निकालते थे वही कपड़ा पहन लेते थे. अब देखिए दिल्ली के बाजार का मंजर. They have given the frame, they have given the urban imperative, and now I will simply do the examples. अब दिल्ली के बाजार का मंजर देखिए. सुनाते फिरते थे सक्के कटोरों की झनकार. सक्के are the water carriers. और कटोरे, and I hope that even the young people know what is a कटोरा. और वो कटोरे छन 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 बोलते थे. सुनाते फिरते थे सक्के कटोरों की झनकार, वो गुल फरोशों के फूलों के टोकरों की बहार. अगर आपको अच्छा लगे तो आप वाह वाह भी कह दीजिए. वो गुल फरोशों के फूलों के टोकरों की बहार, वो सौदा बेचना लोगों का वहाँ पुकार पुकार, वो फिरना खांचे वालों का वहाँ कतार कतार. रखा था लोगों ने दिल्ली का नाम इश्काबाद. ये आपकी दिल्ली है. रखा था लोगों ने दिल्ली का नाम इश्काबाद, बमिसले खाने आशिक वो हो गई बर्बाद.
While Saida Appa was talking of the marketplace, we have a piece that Fouzia will read out to us, and she didn't have enough time. Otherwise, she doesn't read. She enacts it, but performs it. But let's see. This is about a famous kababi who used to operate on the steps of Jama Masjid. His name was Ghummi. And this excerpt that she is reading is by a gentleman called Ashraf Subuhi, who had written pen sketches of people belonging to different professions who lived in Delhi. That book is called Delhi Ki Chand Ajeeb Hastiyan. So this is an excerpt from Ashraf Subuhi's Ghummi Kababi.
तो खातिन हजरात आदाब. तो घूमी कबाबी. तो मियाँ खूब धोबी बेटा चांद सा सीटी और पटा, अजी वो जमाने जमाने लद गए जब खलील खां फाख्ता उड़ाया करते थे। आज की कहो जिसको देखो बेनवा का सौटा बना फिरता है, न बड़ों का अदब न छोटों की लाज। ये तो वही मसल हो गई कि बावले गांव ऊंट आया, लोगों ने जाना परमेश्वर आए हैं। हजरत हमने भी दुनिया देखी है, अजी झुज्जू झोटों में उम्र नहीं गुजारी, रांड के सांड बन के नहीं रहे। क्या कहा 12 बरस दिल्ली में रहे और भाड़ झोंका। हाँ साहब अब तो जो कहो बजा है। आप फूटी पी गई, दिल्ली का कोई हो तो उसके पेट में दर्द उठे, कहीं की ईट कहीं का रोड़ा, भानुमती ने कुनबा जोड़ा। और फिर जैसा राजा वैसी प्रजा, जैसी गंदी शीतला वैसे पूजन हार। अजी मेरी क्या पूछते हो, आटे का चिराग घर रखूं चूहा खाए, बाहर धरूं कौवा ले जाए। अजी उन्हें क्यों नहीं देखते जो आधे काजी कदवा और आधे बाबा आदम बने हुए हैं। आखिर किस बुट्टे पर तित्ता पानी, करगा छोड़ तमाशे जाए और नाहक चोर जुलाहा खाए। खैर भाई हम तो अपनी कहते हैं, जन जर जमीन जुबान फौजिया चारों के घर। अजी यहाँ क्या धरा है, जिसका काम उसी को साझे और करे तो ठेंगा बाजे। मियाँ पहले बादशाही थी अब अंग्रेजी है, सुना नहीं राजा कहे सोनिया पासा पड़े तो दांव। मियाँ कालों का चिराग बुझ गया, गोरों की रत्ती चढ़ी हुई है। अजीब मैं कहता हूँ खुदा से लड़ो, हुकूमत उसकी जिसके हाथ में तलवार। कहते नहीं कि रानी को राना और कानी को काना। खैर तुझे पढ़ाई क्या पड़ी, अपनी नबेड़ तू भाई। जिसकी जबान 100 दफा खुजाए वो हमारे नखरे उठाए। हाँ साहब आपने चवन्नी दी है, वो क्या अर्ज करूं। गुलजार की टोली का एक पुराना लमड़ा आ गया था। भला कहो तो गधी कुम्हार की तुझे राम से क्या काम। अजीब पढ़े लिखो किसी तकरीर करने लगा। मैंने भी जो जरा कसकर मुजम्मे लिए तो कहाँ टिकता। अजी नौकदम भागा, भुस में चुंगी डाल जमालो दूर खड़ी। लीजिए साहब आपकी बारी है। अजी कबाब भी मलाई हैं, जिगर तक सिके हुए। अजी आप तो तशरीफ ले जाइए, मुझे तो अभी न जाने का तक बकवास लगी रहेगी।
What is incredible in this piece, that this man on the street who's speaking, who's talking and addressing somebody who has come to buy kebab from him, the entire conversation is just muhavras, one after the other, and there are words that link them, but it is one muhavra after another, and this is the language that eventually fed into the literary discourse of Urdu poetry and prose and majorly into Hindi, and it was this that was known as Hindustani. It was this language that found its roots here, came back here, and then flourished. Now we will take a major shift from the kind of mood that Ghummi Kababi has created to ask Saida Appa to read about to tell us about the Marsiya of Delhi. Now Marsiya is actually a form of poetry that developed in the Dakhin, and it reached here. Marsiya is the commemoration of the death of the grandsons of the Prophet in the Battle of Karbala. Now this is a strictly Persian tradition, the commemoration of the Battle of Karbala. When it arrived here, and Marsiya began to be written, and the two of the biggest writers of the Marsiya were Anis and Dabir of Lucknow. They totally Indianized the Battle of Karbala. If you read about it, it would appear to you as if it was happening in the Indo-Gangetic Awadh. वो करबला की बैटल अवध में होती है। वो मेहंदियां हैं, चूड़ियां टूट रही हैं, वो सुहाग उजड़ रहे हैं, the entire discourse. And this is the strength. When two traditions interact with each other, they create something totally different.
So before reading Dilli Ka Marsiya, I really like what you said just now. That पूरी इंडो गैंजेटिक प्लेन में वो अरब का मंजर आ गया कि उसमें ये लाइन है कि कहें बानों में शीस नवाऊं कहाँ, मोरा सैया तो मैं को बिसार गयो। ये मरसिया का, ये उसकी जो पूरी जमीन आपने बांधी है यही है। तो ये दिस इज ये स्विच लैंग्वेज, ये मरसिया है जो मौलाना अल्ताफ हुसैन हारी ने लिखा 1857 के, जब दिल्ली उजड़ गई। तो आप लोगों की नज़र है ख़ास तौर से, और इसमें भी आप के ये दिल को चोट लगाने वाला है ये मरसिया, क्योंकि ये एक ऐसी दिल्ली है जो दिल्ली अब ख़त्म हो गई। शायद हम अपने तजुर्बों में जो दिल्ली हमें याद है वो भी शायद अब ख़त्म होती जा रही है। तो कहते हैं तस्किरा दिल्ली मरहूम का ए दोस्त न छेड़, तस्किरा पिस्सा, तस्किरा दिल्ली मरहूम का ए दोस्त न छेड़, न सुना जाएगा तुझसे ये फसाना हरगिज़, न सुना जाएगा तुझसे ये फसाना हरगिज़, और लेके दाग आएगा सीने पे बहुत ए सैयाह, सैयाह इज द ट्रैवलर, लेके दाग आएगा सीने पे बहुत ए सैयाह, देख इस शहर के खंडरों में न जाना हरगिज़, दिल पे चोट लगेगी। लेके दाग आएगा सीने पे बहुत ए सैयाह, देख इस शहर के खंडरों में न जाना हरगिज़। और फिर कहते हैं गालिबो शेफ्तो मोमिनो आजुर्दा के बाद, ये सबसे मशहूर शायर थे उस जमाने के, गालिब, शेफ्ता, मोमिन और आजुर्दा, और भी बहुत से थे, पर कहते हैं कि गालिबो शेफ्तो मोमिनो आजुर्दा के बाद शेर का नाम न लेगा कोई दाना हरगिज़। वो कह गए जो कह गए, अब कौन शेर कहने वाला है। और फिर कहते हैं चप्पे चप्पे पे हैं या गौहरे यकता तहे खाक, all the gems are lying buried in the ground, चप्पे चप्पे पे हैं या गौहरे यकता तहे खाक, दफन होगा न कहीं ऐसा खजाना है। और इसी को गालिब ने कहा था, सब कहाँ कुछ लाल और गुल में नुमाया हो गई, खाक में क्या सूरतें होंगी कि बिना हो गई। ये तो सब सूरतें अब खाक में मिल गई। तो चप्पे चप्पे पे हैं या गौहरे यकता तहे खाक, दफन होगा न कभी ऐसा खजाना हरगिज़। और फिर कहते हैं कभी ए इल्मो हुनर घर था तुम्हारा दिल्ली, कभी ए इल्मो हुनर घर था तुम्हारा दिल्ली, हमको भूले तो हो पर घर न भुलाना। और आखिर में कहते हैं, लंबी है मगर मैं उसको खत्म करती हूँ, कि रात आखिर हुई और बज़्म हुई ज़ेरो ज़बर। नाउ दिस वोकैबुलरी आप इसको सीख लीजिए। ज़ेर कहते हैं, these are deflections in the language। ज़ेर मतलब नीचा और ज़बर मतलब ऊंचा।
इस और उस का फर्क है, नीचे लाइन लगाएंगे इस लगेगा, ऊपर लगाएंगे तो उस हो जाएगा।
तो ये ज़ेर ज़बर मतलब एब एंड टाइड, ऊपर नीचे। रात आखिर हुई आप भी यूज कर सकते हैं कि भाई हम तो ज़ेर ज़बर हो गए, अब ऊपर कभी नीचे। इट्स अ वेरी नाइस एक्सप्रेशन टू लर्न। रात आखिर हुई और बज़्म हुई ज़ेर ज़बर, अब न देखेगा कोई लुत्फ़ शबाना है। अब रात की कोई लुत्फ कोई नहीं देखेगा, क्योंकि अब दिल्ली जो है वो उजड़ चुकी है। रात आखिर हुई और बज़्म हुई ज़ेर ज़बर, अब न देखेगा कोई लुत्फ़ शबाना है।
This form that Altaf Hussain Haji wrote in, this is known as, he named it the Marsiya of Delhi, but this is a form that started about 100 years or maybe 150 years before with Mir, and this is a lament of a city, and this became a major poetic form. This was known as Sheher-Asho. वो फैज़ तक लोगों ने लिखी है, about the destruction of a city, और उसकी शुरुआत मीर ने की थी 1730s में, when नादिर शाह sacked Delhi. So he says, एक खराबा हुआ जहान आबाद, वरना हर एक कदम पे यहाँ घर था। और he says, दिल का उजड़ना सहल सही, बसना सहल नहीं लोगों, बस्ती तो फिर बस्ती है, बसते बसते बसते। So it is this tradition which the poet is reacting to his immediate surroundings. और वो किस तरह सिटी डिस्ट्रॉय हो रही है, पूरा कल्चर जा रहा है. And हाल ही का बरसिया became actually a reaction to what had happened. 1739 was Nadir Shah and this is 1857. तो ये post 1857 की दिल्ली है जिसका हाल ही ने लिखा है. Now to change track again, I will ask Fauzia to read a piece which is the typical language of the Karkhandar really. Now Karkhandar is a strange community. ये दिल्ली का जो छोटा बिजनेसमैन है, they speak a totally different language, and this is something that you will notice in all large cities. Different sections within the city have their own specific languages, and they all coexist. And after this, I'll ask Fauzia to also give us excerpts from a fight between a dhobi and his wife. No, between two dhobans. Fight between two dhobans and comments on them by a third dhoban. तो पहले करखंदार और फिर नहीं थोड़ा शुरू करो फिर.
तो ख्वातीन हज़रात, दिल्ली की करखंदारी जुबान. आज सुबह में छत पर खड़ा कबूतर उड़ा दिया था कि इत्ते में किसी ने दरवाजा खटखटाया. मैंने नीचू झांक कर देखा तो करखंदार का मुलाजिम खड़ा हुआ था. मुझे देखकर बोला कि वही करखंदार क्या लमड़ा हुआ है, विनों ने तुम्हें बुलाया है. मैंने किया, अबे पहले ये बता कि करखंदार क्या लमड़ा हुआ है या विन की बीवी किया. वो बोला, खलीफा तुम तो खिल्लीबाजी करते हो, मैं जा रही हूँ, जल्दी से आना. मैंने किया, तू बड़ी घबरी में, जाकर कह दीजिए मैं नहीं आऊंगा. वो बोला, क्यों? मैंने किया कि करखंदार ने मुझे भांड समझा है कि ऐन बरवक्त पर बुलावा भेज दिया और विनय चाहिए था कि 1-2 दिन पहले बुलावा भेजते. वो बोला, मगर खलीफा जी लमड़ा तो आज ही हुआ है, वो भी अचानक. यूं के करखंदार के हिसाब से पूरा 1 महीना बाकी था. मैंने किया, ये लमड़ा होगा बड़ा तेज. विस ने तो 9 महीने का रास्ता 8 महीने में तय कर लिया. अच्छा, जाकर करखंदार से कह दीजिए मैं कोई 15 मिनट में आता हूँ. खैर वो चला गया और मैंने जल्दी जल्दी कबूतरों को जाल में बंद करके चलने की तैयारी की. हमारे करखंदार की 7 लड़कियां हैं. विनय बेटे का बहुत अरमान था तो मौला ने वो भी पूरा कर दिया. जब मैं विन के घर गया तो वहां बड़े जश्न उड़ रहे थे. करखंदार मारे खुशी के रेशा खत्मी हुए चले जा रहे थे. अंदर डोमियां गा बजा रही थी. घर मेहमानों से भरा था. मैं जाकर मुमताज के पास बैठ गया. इत्ते में अल्लाह की अमान, पीरों का साया कहते हुए भांडवी आदम के और विनों ने अपनी ढोलकी बजानी शुरू कर दी. सबसे पहले विनों ने ये गजल कही, फलक देता है जिनको ऐश विन को गम भी होते हैं, जहां बजते हैं नक्कारे वहां मातम भी होते हैं. विन को ये गजल गाते सुनकर करखंदार का इंजन तेज हो गया और बैल देने की जंगा वो भांडों को मारने को पी गए. बोले, अबे तुम्हें खुदा की मार बदफाले निकालते हो, हमारे यहाँ तो खुशी मनाई जा रही है और तुम कहते हो जहाँ बजते हैं नक्कारे वहाँ मातम भी होते हैं. मैंने किया, करखंदार ये बेचारे तालीम याफ्ता नहीं है, अब इन्हें क्या मालूम इस लफ्ज के मायने क्या होते हैं. शुक्रिया. कल्लन, वजीरा और ईदू तीनों घाट रवाना होते हैं. आगे पीछे और भी धोबी जाते हैं. थोड़ी देर में दिन निकल आता है. कटरे का हर छोटा बड़ा जाग उठा है. कोई बैठा हुक्का पी रहा है. वो देखिए ईदू की जोरू लाडो बैठी मुंह धो रही है. कल्लन की घरवाली शम्मो टांगे पसारे बैठी पान बना रही है. शम्मू का लड़का उससे रोटी मांग रहा है। ओ माँ रोटी दे दे माँ। अरे वाह रे लमड़े, तुझे खाट से उठते ही भूख लगाई? क्या ठीक है तेरा? दे दे ना, मुझे भूख लगी है, नहीं तो बाबू से कह दूंगा। जा जा, हांडी में पड़ी है खा ले। नहीं, मुझे तो तू दे। चल चल यहाँ से, एक लात मारूंगी हरामी के। अरे तो रोटी दे है या ना? देख रहे मैं मारती हूँ जूती, फिर तेरा बाप भी आएगा ना तो ना छोड़ूंगी। मुंह चुड़ाकर भला मार तो कैसे मारती है? अरे ठहर तो सही हरामी, तू जाता कहाँ है भागकर? तेरा सर ना फोड़ूं तो नाम नहीं। जूती खींचकर मारती है जो इत्तेफाक से लाडो के मुंह पर जा लगती है। अरे ओ अंधी, ये तूने जूती क्यों मारी? अंधी होगी तू, मैंने तेरे कब मारी? मेरे नहीं मारी तो क्या अपनी अम्मा के मारी थी? अरे तू मारती आई होगी अपनी अम्मा को, मैं तो लमड़े को मार रही थी। अच्छा, मारते वक्त मुझको नहीं देखा? ये बैल के दीदे क्या बटन हो गए थे? क्या नहीं क्या करे, नहीं दिखा उस वक्त? अरे तेरी तरह मेरी आंखें चील की तरह थोड़ी है। क्यों री, अगर मेरी आंख फूट जाती, वो तो यूं कहो कि उचटती भी लगी, फूट जाती तो क्या होता? अजी ऐसा मजा चखाती कि हमेशा हमेशा याद रखती। अरे जा सटल लो, तू जैसी पीसियों फिरे हैं रात दिन, बता दो क्या मजा चखवाती? मजा? अरे एक के बदले तेरी दोनों फोड़ती, दोनों। और तेरा खसम बोलता ना तो उसको भी काना करती। ओहो, तू तो है बलक की जल्लाद की जोरू, भुतनी की शक्ल तो देखो। तुझ हथनी से तो अच्छी हूँ, जोरू हथनी मियां सांड। छैला बैल को उठाना बिठाना भी तो न जाने। अरे ओ रान, अरे डायन, अरे कहबा, चल चल चुड़ैल, ढड्डो, हरामजादी, तू होगी तू। अरे तू होगी, तेरी अम्मा, तेरी सारी पीढ़ी, तेरा सारा खानदान।
While all this was going on, there was a very interesting movement in poetry writing. The poetic tradition, as was inherited from Persia, was essentially the beloved is always a male in the entire tradition of Urdu poetry. And very few will you find references which suggest that the beloved is a female. And there were also suggestions that the lover is also a male. So it is, you know, it sat on this cusp where you weren't very sure. And it is, while this is the dominant tradition of poetry, there is a parallel where there were men who were writing as if they were women, and there were some women also who wrote, but most of the poetry of women who wrote, we are not familiar with the book. But there is some of that survived, and one of them is Nazni, जो मैं सईदा से कहूँगा कि उनकी कुछ पोइट्री की एग्जाम्पल्स हैं।
So this persona that Sohail talked about, the persona of the male beloved, I used to hear these lines, and as a small child, फारसी में है, और मेरी समझ में नहीं आता था कि इसका क्या मफहूम है, but I think you will all understand it. It's not referring to a woman, it's referring to a man. निगारे खूब रुए, यानी खूबसूरत, निगारे खूबसूरत है, निगारे खूब रुए सर्व कद्दे, सर्फ की तरह उसका कद है, लाला रुखसारे, यानी निगार खूबसूरत है, लंबे कद की है, और उसके गाल जो है वो सुर्ख है, लाला रुखसारे, निगारे खूब रुए सर्व कद्दे, लाला रुखसारे। सो बाद में समझ में आया कि ये किसके तरफ इशारा है। तो ये जो मैं आपके सामने कुछ दो ही लाइनें हैं, ये पढ़ना चाहती हूँ। दिस इज फ्रॉम बहादुर शाह जफर का जो आखिरी मुशायरा था, जिसका which was written up as a play called दिल्ली के आखिरी शमा। तो उसमें एक शायर थे सुहेल, मिर्जा अली बेग, तो वो औरतों की ज़बान में शायरी करते थे। और अपना तखल्लुस वो his poetic name was नाज़नीन, तो नाज़नीन के नाम से वो पढ़ते थे। तो वो एक तार भरा दुपट्टा, अब ये बहादुर शाह जफर का दरबार है, गालिब बैठे हैं, ज़ौक़ बैठे हैं, उनके उस्ताद बैठे हैं, शेफ्ता बैठे हैं, तिश्ना बैठे हैं, एंड ये आए, इन्होंने तारों वाली एक दुपट्टा निकाला एंड पुट द दुपट्टा ओवर हिज शोल्डर, और उन्होंने ये शेर पढ़ा। अब ये औरतों की ज़बान में जैसे ये फौजिया पढ़ती हैं, तो इसमें जो इशारा है वो है द स्टोरी ऑफ हज़रत यूसुफ एंड ज़ुलेखा। So those of you who, some of you know and those who don't know, so Hazrat Yusuf had been imprisoned and Zulekha was the name of the queen. So she fell in love with Hazrat Yusuf, and Hazrat Yusuf was actually the most beautiful and completely an image that was, everybody was wanting Hazrat Yusuf, all the courtesans and everyone. तो हज़रत यूसुफ एक खूबसूरती का नमूना थे, और जुलेखा जो थी वो उन पे आशिक हो गई थी, और वो उस वहाँ की मलिका थी। तो अब ये सुनिए, ये औरतों की ज़बान में। तो नाज़नीन बैठे, दुपट्टा ओढ़ा और कहने लगे, हुई उशाक में मशहूर, यानी जो जितने आशिक हैं, ये ज़रा ज़बान को जस्ट एंजॉय द लैंग्वेज। हुई उशाक में मशहूर यूसुफ सा जवां ताका, किसको ताका, यानी she became famous among the lovers because she targeted a handsome man like Yusuf. हुई उशाक में मशहूर यूसुफ सा जवां ताका, बुआ हम औरतों में था बड़ा दीदा जुलेखा का। यानी she बड़ी चलती हुई फिरज़ी थी, brave woman। बुआ हम औरतों में, यानी वो एक मर्द बैठे हैं तारकशी का दुपट्टा ओढ़े हुए और कह रहे, बुआ हम औरतों में था बड़ा दीदा जुलेखा का, मुझे कहती हैं बाजी, ये तो आप भी सीख लीजिए, ये आपके, मुझे कहती हैं बाजी तूने ताका छोटे देवर को, मुझे कहती हैं बाजी तूने ताका छोटे देवर को, मैं डरने की भी नहीं, हाँ नहीं ताका तो अब ताका। मुझे कहती है बाजी तूने ताका छोटे देवर को, नहीं डरने की मैं भी, हाँ नहीं ताका तो अब ताका। तो ये थे नाज़नीन, और जब वो ये शेर पढ़ रहे थे तो बाजार में जो उस वक्त जो आवाजें पढ़ रही थी वो भी मैं आपको जरा बता दूं कि क्या उस वक्त आवाजें पढ़ रही थी बाजार में। और अभी इन्होंने जिक्र किया सुहेल ने कि उसका दौलत की चाट का क्या कहते, निमिश। तो बाजार में जो उस वक्त बाजारों में जो आवाजें पड़ रही थी वो ये थे कि the people who used to sell chana, they were called बड़भौंजे. This is also another word to put it. बड़भौंजे, भाड़ में चने जो भूनते हैं वो बड़भौंजे कहलाते हैं। तो बाजारों में आवाजें पड़ रही थी, चने हैं, मसाले के बने हैं, घी के तले हैं, नून मिर्च मिले हैं, खाएगा चना रहेगा बना। फिर दौलत की चाट, दिस इज निमिश। किसी ने खाई है निमिश? चाट है दौलत की, दिल वालों की। मुफलिसी का दिल उदास है, उसे दौलत की चाट है, चाट लो दौलत को, दौलत की चाट। चाट लो दौलत को, दौलत की चाट लो। और फिर ककड़ियां, ये तो आप जानते हैं। लैला की उंगलियां हैं या मजनू की पसलियां, लैला की उंगलियां हैं या मजनू की पसलियां, मेरी जो ककड़ियां हैं वो क्या खूब ककड़ियां।
So we can continue with this. There is plenty of stuff to go around, but I think we are little pressed for time, and
save some for next time.
Yes.
Yeah. मैं एक बात ये कहना चाहती हूँ, आपने डॉक्टर साहब ने कहा कि this is it's such a wealth and it has to be a continued thing, right? This is just a glimpse, just a teaser, just a glimpse. तो ये कुछ झलकियाँ हैं, मगर ये अगर ये जो हमारा आपस का जो ये एक रिश्ता है और डायलॉग है, ये अगर चलता ही रहे, जैसे कहते हैं कि क्या है, मुस्तकिल दौर पर दौर चलता रहे, रौनकें मैं कदा यूं ही बढ़ती रहे, एक गिरता रहे एक संभलता रहे। तो गिरते रहिए, संभलते रहिए और रौनक इसकी बढ़ाते रहिए।
I think what Saida is saying about a continuity and there is need to carry this forward. So I think Rizio has an announcement.
There is a project that we are talking about here. It's called Langscaping Delhi, mapping a city's linguistic roots. I think we are at the right moment to initiate this project and kind of announce that we are going to do this here. I'll just tell you what we are planning to do with this project, and then Sohail can also add a little bit to it to talk about how relevant it is. We thought, because we are a space that is thinking about language as a deeper space, and it's not just a kind of, you can't look at it simplistically any longer here. We thought it is important that because we are based in Delhi, we want to extend this to other spaces also, but because the festival is based in Delhi now, we thought we should start by thinking about the languages in Delhi and start this by looking at doing a survey, a kind of mapping of what is happening in the linguistic space of Delhi. This is also very important for us because, as I mentioned earlier, we do not want to make a distinction between major language, minor language, that language, this language, because for us, even if there's only one speaker to a language, it becomes, if you call it a minor language or if you marginalize it in some way, it is actually marginalizing that speaker, which is against our constitution, because by the constitution all of us are equal, and it becomes problematic for us. So it's important for us to give this importance to all languages and bring all of them to an equal platform. This is also our response to the growing intolerance in the city in various ways, to show that the city is a pluricultural, multilingual space, and that is the ethos of the city, that, as we've heard, this is not really a contemporary thing, like it's got roots, that we are, actually it's a pun on the word roots, because it is roots and roots, so it's horizontal and deep down, vertically down, and also horizontal, so there are different dimensions to this project. It's we are hoping that we will do an audiovisual documentation of the languages of the city, with kind of involving student communities, language communities in the city. From what Sohail, we had a conversation about this, and from what I'm not really equipped to talk about this, especially in the case of Delhi, but from the conversations that we've had about this, I'm sure that this project will reveal a lot of, it will give us a lot of insights about this, and this is also what we want to do with this space. It is not just a kind of conversation which is happening in this kind of halls where we come together, discuss and go back, but also we want to involve students who will internalize this, who will understand and transform themselves. So this is a social transformation project also. We would want to involve, really bring this, kind of develop this into a people's movement by involving us. So anybody in this audience, if anybody wants to participate in this in some ways, because everybody in the city can contribute to this project, because it's actually a people's movement of languages in the city. So we are planning to document, audiovisual documentation of the real expression of languages in Delhi, different parts of Delhi in different phases. So I'm just announcing that at this point, that we are beginning this today, and we will be involving a lot of agencies, schools, colleges, universities, and language communities in this project as we go ahead. And I would also request Sohail to kind of elaborate this a little and put this in context. Thank you.
You see, Rizio has basically explained to you the idea. I find that we were talking about it yesterday, and suddenly I realized that if we start looking at Delhi and the growth of Delhi chronologically, and then we do a mapping of languages. So, for example, in 1865, the first train arrived, 31st December midnight. The first train from Calcutta entered Delhi. But before that, the railway station had to be built. And where the railway station was built, this was right in the heart of the old city. People were asked to move out. What happened to them, how they moved, etc., is a long story. I'm not going into that. But by the time it finished, Sadar Bazar and Paharganj had come up. Then came the railway line, the railway station, and the first railway colony was built near the Lothian Bridge. And that is when a whole lot of people from Maharashtra and Bombay and Calcutta, where trains were already running, they arrived. So right in the heart of the city you had an enclave of Bengali speaking people and some Marathi. Then 1911, the capital, shifting of the capital was announced. 1912, the capital was shifted, and Babus from Bengal came and started living in Chandni Chowk. That is where the first Bengali periodical began to be published from the fountain. There was a colony of Bengalis. That is where the first Bengali sweet shop opened, Kamla Sweets, 1913. Then eventually the capital shifted, everybody shifted in 1930. And along Gold Market was one major concentration of Bengalis. And Mahamaya store opened that sold only Bengali saris. The next movement of Bengalis was in in Devnagar and Karolba. Then 1947 Bengalis came and started living in East Pakistan Displaced Persons Colony, EPDP, which is now the Chitranjan Park. 1947 Punjabis came. But all of them did not live together. And all of them were not one group of people. They spoke different languages. So the Multanis lived together in an area known as New Multan Nagar. And the Lailpuri Punjabis lived in a colony called New Lailpur. So you have these little centers. At the time of the Second World War, Lodi colony was built up for doctors. It was doctors who worked because Safdarjung airport was there. The injured from the Burma operation were brought to Delhi. That's why the doctors' colony came up. Safdarjung hospital was an army hospital. And there were these doctors who were brought in from different parts of the country, and they started living in Lodi colony. Then in 1960s, R.K. Puram comes up. By this time, large number of people working in the government offices are no longer from Bihar. They are no longer from Bengal. They are from Kerala. The stenotypists from Kerala were the most prized stenotypists. Every minister wanted a Malayali stenotypist. So Ramakrishna Puram, named after a Bengali revolutionary who changed tax midway and became a spiritualist, became a center of a whole lot of Tamilians and Malayalis, and the Malay Mandir came up. So if one looks at this city chronologically, how it has developed, and you map different areas which have their own little cultural hubs, their own language centers. For example, in Mangolpuri there are 2 blocks which are totally populated by Tamilian working class. All of them are in just 2 blocks. You know, so this will be fascinating to see how this city, with all its diversities, all its mixing together, still has these little enclaves where people still go back to their own spices, their own toddy, their own abuses. You know, so I think it will be a fascinating thing, and I don't think we have tried to study any city like this before. So if it begins in Delhi, and especially in these days, where we are being told what is our culture, what is our language, how to define ourselves as Indians, I think it is necessary to underscore the diversity. Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, some questions.
Yes, in case there are questions.